The group of 7 industrialized nations is regarded by many in the world as the premier bloc of importance outside of any kind of a military alliance. The economic power of the G7 really is unrivaled in the world by anything. You may have some in the BRICS and in Asia and the Indo-Pacific, and certainly the rise of China and several other players. Many people are trying to add additional poles to the economic power, but nothing rivals the G7, and especially led by the United States. The issue has always been that the U.S. leads these powerful economic bloc of people, and which has ramifications for the whole globe. So everybody listens to the G7, or at least that's the way it has been. Now then, with what's unfolding in Israel right now, there is a dangerous, in my view, loss of leadership and credibility and power by the G7, led by the United States. And the one who is right now rising above all that is Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. And while some cheer that on, I promise you, and I'll show you throughout the course of this episode here, that's not something to cheer on. That doesn't help the United States. It doesn't help the Israeli people, and it doesn't help the G7 writ large. It's not even good for the world. And if you think that I'm exaggerating here, just consider on the surface of it, even before I show you or tell you anything. You have the G7, the most powerful economies of the planet, and have been for many decades, are cumulatively basically allowing one man of a tiny nation of 6 million or so to dominate the agenda. And even though all these nations say one thing, he says something different, and what he says rules. Now, as I'm going to explain to you, I'm going to show you why that's bad for Israel, why it's not good for anybody in the West, and something needs to change pretty quick. Now, what's kind of starting off the matter here is that Biden has gone out and made a comment a couple of days ago, 4 days ago, and he rather stringently and accurately, I'll give him credit for this, laid out what needs to happen in Israel for everybody's benefit.
Now, after intensive diplomacy carried out by my team, my many conversations with leaders of Israel, Qatar, and Egypt, and other Middle Eastern countries, Israel has offered a comprehensive new proposal. It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages. And the United States will work with our partners to rebuild homes, schools, and hospitals in Gaza, to help repair communities that were destroyed in the chaos of war. And with this deal, Israel could become more deeply integrated in the region, including, it's no surprise to you all, including no potential historic normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia. For months, people all over the world have called for ceasefire. Now it's time to raise your voices and demand that Hamas come to the table, agrees to this deal, and ends this war that they began.
So the emphasis there is on an absolute need for an immediate ceasefire. And he says at the very end there that Hamas is what needs to change. That's what needs to come to the table. And if only they will, things are going to be good. That led 4 days later and 2 days ago, 2 days later and 2 days ago on the, I believe it was the 3rd of June, the G7 issued a joint statement in all their names. And in this letter, very short statement, but very important. We, the leaders of the group of 7, fully endorse and will stand behind the comprehensive deal outlined by President Biden that would lead to an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all hostages, a significant and sustained increase in humanitarian assistance for the distribution throughout Gaza, and an enduring end to the crisis with Israel's security interest and Gazan civilian safety assured. We reaffirm our support for a credible pathway towards peace leading to a two-state solution. We call on Hamas to accept this deal that Israel is ready to move forward with, and we urge countries with influence over Hamas to help ensure that it does so. Now, you heard in President Biden's statement there a second ago that he said that this was at the initiation of Israel. This is where this came from. This isn't something that just came out of nowhere. He says this was originated in Israel, and it was because of all his negotiation and his team in the background that was working alongside them to come to that. And of course, it's those darn Hamas people who were the problem. This was reinforced yesterday by Matt Miller.
The roadblock right now to a ceasefire is not Israel. The roadblock to a ceasefire is Hamas.
But is it? Is it Hamas? It's the roadblock. Because according to the news, it ain't Hamas. In fact, the news immediately after that was that Hamas was open to the idea and was willing to discuss it. It's Netanyahu's far-right partners, however, who reject the ceasefire compromise. Netanyahu has since come out emphatically and says, no, there will be no ceasefire until we have completely destroyed Hamas. Now, listen, just think about how irrational and illogical that is on the surface of it. You have the president of the United States who claims that this was actually originated in Israel and that he got all the G7 people to get behind it. And it's those darn Hamas guys who are the problem. And we need them to come to the table. The Hamas side says, yes, we'll come to the table. Let's discuss. We're open to that. And then the people who allegedly said no, they're the ones who are the roadblock. Israel has absolutely, through Netanyahu, said no, we're not willing in a ceasefire until they're destroyed. But how can you have any kind of a negotiation when one side says to the other, we won't talk until you're all dead? You understand that by default, that automatically means there will be no negotiation. So then what's the truth? Was this something that came out of Israel? Was this something that was designed inside their government? Or is it something that President Biden just on his own came up with and maybe thought that he could coerce Netanyahu into doing it by making this public claim that Israel was behind it, and then they're not? Now, evidence is pretty strong that it's the second version of that Israel never agreed to that. And especially the statement in the G7 summit statement that a two-state solution is necessary. You see, Israel has been emphatic from the beginning of this war, really all the way through, even decades before. I mean, Netanyahu in particular has been adamant, open and public about he has no interest in a two-state solution. And he's continuing on that path right now. He won't even contemplate a two-state solution. When he's talking about what's going to come next, the day after, there's no talk about self-rule at all. There's definitely no talk about a two-state solution. As a matter of fact, two members of Netanyahu's government, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, well-known right-wing figures, have said that they would resign and the government would fall if Netanyahu accepts this. So you have to wonder now again, who's in charge here? The G7 nations recognize, because they're moved by politics like everybody else, they've seen all of these protests that have been going on all over the country and all over the world in their countries. They see that their population and their voting population, and this is especially poignant for President Biden now heading into the presidential election, are moved by the suffering they see of the Palestinian people. There are people all over the United States who are just repulsed by what they see on their cameras and screens every day, on their social media, on the newscast, where they see so much suffering and so much death. And listen, we don't show you the bad stuff here. Number one, because I don't want to get banned off YouTube or have the video taken down. But I promise you, there are so many things that are coming out there are just horrific. Just maiming of people and burning of bodies routinely. The more of them happened again overnight. You had Biden say, we will stop giving you weapons, Israel. We will stop giving you ammunition of certain kinds if you go into Rafah. If you make this effort to go into Rafah and have a big operation there without doing all these things that they mentioned, we're going to stop supporting you. And what happened? What did Netanyahu do? He just said, yeah, whatever you say, we're going to do whatever we're going to want. And all of a sudden, tanks are in the middle of Rafah. And what did the United States do? Nothing. We didn't do anything. Biden did not make good on his threats. And what does that tell you? What does that tell anyone who's running the show? It's not the United States. It's not President Biden. It's not the State Department. It's not our Department of Defense. It is Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing government. It's just true. Listen, I know a lot of people watching this are big supporters of Israel. Just even saying these kinds of things, I know, makes a lot of people mad. I saw an article or a news cast on Fox News, I think it was from yesterday, where a certain guest came on and was just reviling anyone who dared say anything against what Netanyahu wants to do, as though it's sacrosanct, as though it carries the force of law, as though it carries moral right because he said it. And it doesn't. And it does not. And when you have the United States of America, and by then extension, the G7, being shown as impotent and having no power except then to do what they're told by the Israeli government, folks, that's bad news. It's bad for America. It's bad for our influence all around the world. And when you're talking about wanting to have influence over powerhouses like China, like Russia, and other major issues, North Korea, Iran, others around the world, even some of our friends, when they see that you see that our government is completely impotent and powerless against this one man, Benjamin Netanyahu, why are they going to listen to us? When we turn a blind eye to our own values and the things we've always said it was important about the people being able to determine their own future, about freedom, democracy, about taking care of the powerless, about preventing innocent people from being killed in war. All those things have gone out the window now. And just whatever Israel says, they use language and words which are completely disconnected from reality. But they're accepted in Washington. They're accepted by so many people just because those words are something they want to cling to, because they want to believe it. They want to believe that this ally that we've been supporting for decades, since the middle of last century, is the good guy and is only a good guy. And everything they do is good. We want to believe that. But folks, it's just not true. Your camera shows it to you. The screen on your devices scream it every day. And yet we haven't not been able to act on it. And it's coming at a real cost. And look, it's not just what we're saying here. You also have Netanyahu continuing on with his comments. And he's basically saying, even despite all these things I've just mentioned to it, here's what he said, I believe, day before yesterday.
We have gone a long way to return the hostages while keeping the war's objectives in mind, primarily the elimination of Hamas. We insist that we will achieve both. It's all part of the plan, not something I've just added.
Well, yeah, that part I think is true. It is all part of his plan. And you see, that comes in light of what Biden had said about the ceasefire, about it being Israel's plan, etc. You see from his own mouth, nope, we're going to continue on to destroy Hamas. But here's why I told you at the outset, this isn't even good for Israel, because Benjamin Netanyahu has his country on a path that is going to lead to much, much worse of an outcome than anything they've suffered so far. I know the claim, again, the words are that he's going to bring peace to Israel, that he's going to destroy Hamas, that he's going to end the terrorist threat to his country. He's not. He is not. He's doing the opposite. The opposite. Benjamin Netanyahu, by his policies, by his military first policies, and his absolute disregard for humanity, for the entire population, 2-point-something million in the Gaza Strip, is guaranteeing future insecurity for Israel. He is guaranteeing the creation of much, much more hatred for his country, of future terrorist attacks, because when people are powerless and they have no ability to stand up to a mighty military of the likes of Israel, especially in the Gaza Strip, then they have nothing to resort to but terrorism. That's not to condone that at all. I still condemn unequivocally, with no caveats, October 7th, flat out, completely disregard it and say it's wrong. Flat out. And any future terrorist attempts. Let's be clear on this. Let's make sure there's no confusion in anybody's mind. I will condemn that as well before it's happened. But you have to be able to acknowledge reality and in human conditions and what people will do, what they have done, and what they're going to do under similar circumstances. It's predictable. You put people under that kind of pressure, you deprive them of any hope, you deprive them of any possibility of freedom, any possibility of self-determination. Folks, what do you think they're going to do? What have they always done? What did Americans do in the Revolutionary War when we were deprived of a lot of our rights and economic freedoms? I mean, in comparison, that was tame what happened. And you see how we reacted to it. And you've seen that all over the world. People have been rising up against oppression for millennium, thousands of years, because it's a human issue. It's a human nature issue. It doesn't matter technology, time, culture, any of that stuff. It's humanity. And to pretend and you just desire that humanity and history will suddenly no longer apply because we don't want it to is foolish, self-defeating. It's setting yourself up for disaster. And that's exactly where we are. That's where we are right now. So Biden trying to hold Netanyahu to a standard actually makes some sense. But Biden doesn't have the courage or the leadership ability to make good on it. If he took action with what he said, with the threats that he had made, then he could, even kicking and screaming, help Israel to stop the damage that they've done. So, look, if he did everything that Biden said without exception today, everything that was in that G7 summit today, the damage that has already been done over the last 8 months is incalculable. It's going to take a generation, maybe more, going forward to have a shot at producing some kind of genuine peace. Because the hatred among both sides, both the Israelis against the Palestinians and Palestinians against the Israelis, is off the charts. But we can start slowing the thing down. But we're not. In fact, it's just egregious to me and just shameful to me that instead of the president and the United States government showing some backbone and some spine and doing what makes sense, what actually helps our ally, what actually helps our own national interest, instead, we're prepared to do something even worse. And in the light of everything I just told you, where Netanyahu has repudiated everything we've said, disregarded what our president has said, and is doing whatever he wants and telling us still, give me all your ammunition and weapons, we're going to invite him to speak to a joint session of Congress. The ultimate honor that our country can bestow upon another leader. That's the punishment that Netanyahu is going to get for repudiating our president, for doing whatever he wants, no matter what our country has said, no matter what the G7 has said. Now, there's at least one person who's not for that, and that's Jewish Senator Bernie Sanders.
The leadership of Congress has invited Prime Minister Netanyahu for a joint address before Congress. I'm not going. I'll tell you why. Israel had every right in the world to defend itself against the horrific Hamas terrorist attack of October 7th. But you know what? Israel did not have the right under Netanyahu's right-wing extremist leadership to go to war against the entire Palestinian people. It did not have a right to destroy massive amounts of housing, the civilian infrastructure, water, sewage, electricity, bomb every university in Gaza. Did not have the right to do that. And they certainly do not have the right to use starvation as a means of war. Right now, tens and tens of thousands of children in Gaza are facing starvation, malnutrition, and famine. That is wrong. That is unacceptable. You do not honor a leader who is doing these terrible things to the people of Gaza.
Listen, folks, I part of me understands why there is such revulsion to that. But, you know, it's just been disappointing to me for anyone who's spoken out for the Palestinian people and for any kind of just modicum of decency and humanity is immediately disregarded as anti-Semitism. Are you going to really tell me that the Jewish senator, Bernie Sanders, is an anti-Semite? I mean, it would be absurd on the face value. You can't say that. That's why he's making this statement. But people will just ignore it. They'll just ignore, oh, well, it's just Bernie being Bernie, whatever, because they don't want to look at the facts. They don't want to look at the evidence, and they want to cling to their pre-existing beliefs that Israel is always right, Israel is always in the good, and those darn Palestinians are always in the wrong. They're all terrorists. They don't deserve, there are no innocent Palestinians. I keep hearing that over and over, and it disgusts me. And let me reiterate to you folks, It's not good for Israel. This is not helping Israel. And I know this is not a popular message. It's not even a popular message on this platform, on YouTube. I'm looking right now at our counter now. We have 175 people, 173 now watching live. That's about a fifth of what our normal viewership is, or some small percentage of it, because the algorithms on YouTube will suppress anything that's not pro-Israel. That's just a fact. We knew that before we go in, so I know that our audience is going to be smaller just by the fact that the algorithms are going to be less down, because that's just how the prevailing view is in the country right now. But I don't care. Even though I know the numbers are going to be low, we feel a moral obligation to say the truth, to tell you what you don't want to hear because you need to hear it. More people need to hear this message, not fewer, because it just is going to undermine our own credibility in the world. It's going to undermine the credibility of the G7 in areas where we really need it to be credible. And ultimately, it's going to harm the Israeli people themselves. They're going to be ultimately one of the biggest bill payers. Not the biggest, because that's still going to be the Palestinian people. They have the least power, and nobody with any power is behind them. We're the one group, one country in the world that could actually help the Palestinian people. We have the ability to do it. We could help bring forth, with tough love, with wisdom and courage, we could help bring about a condition that would help the Israeli people actually have peace, and the Palestinian people stop being killed on a daily basis and have at least a path, a possibility to freedom and independence in the future. We're probably the only one that can do that. And right now, we're not. Instead, we're submitting to a small country, to a blind right-wing leader who wants to just do things the way he wants to, and is oblivious to any other way to do it. And we're allowing him to run the show. And we're all going to be paying for that, folks. I know it's not popular among some. I'm sorry. I don't care. I don't care if people don't like that. It's the truth, and it will play out that way. Time will validate and vindicate this kind of view, and all those who are joining us in this kind of message, Bernie Sanders being one of them, will be that will be vindicated. And I'm sorry for it. It anguishes me. This is not something I want to be proven right on, because it means that more people are going to suffer, and this is going to have ramifications going on into the future. But we are going to continue to tell you the truth. We're going to continue to bring it to you, whether anybody likes it or not, because that's what we're all about. We are unintimidated and uncompromised on doing the truth and telling people what they need to know. We're going to continue doing that. We got another show for you at 3:00 this afternoon, where we're going to be giving you a similar kind of truth on the Russia-Ukraine war. There's some things going on there that you need to know about, and we're going to bring it to you at 3:00 today. Be sure and like and subscribe, and please share this with your friends, because they're not going to get this through the normal channels. And if you won't know anybody that wants the truth and wants to know what's really going on with this Israeli-Hamas war and all the things that the U.S. is doing, this is where they're going to get it. Thanks, and we'll see you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.